Welcome to the Queer Witch Project, your resource for all things queer and witchy. I am Damona Peacock, a fabulous, non-binary, neurospicy, ordained queerdo with a fascination for all things cycles, symbolism, and patterns.
And I'm Moonkittee, your queer femme poly-kitchen witch and proud geek. Today's topic is finding a queer deity. Hmm.
Ooh, deity work.
Yes. So it's one of those things that as queer people, it sometimes can seem a little bit challenging and difficult to find a deity of some sort that resonates with us because we think of all of the, especially if you're brought up in a Christian format, you think of the all male God and
Mm-hmm.
everything else. It's really hard to kind of find deities that kind of influence us or are noted as queer because every story that we hear in general tends to be set through a heteronormative lens and given sometimes liberties, shall we say, with the characterizations of different deities and gods and goddesses over the years.
Yeah, I definitely didn't get queer culture, like I did get queer culture fed to me as a child, but it was definitely through like TV media.
Hmm.
And when we were learning like the classics or the mythologies in school, nobody out and out said like this is
Right.
queer in
Mm-mm.
any sort of way, because like that wasn't stuff that we discussed in a very heteronormative
Hmm.
society in which I was raised in.
Yes.
Also, like just deity work in general, I love to bring up, first of all, as a pagan,
Hmm.
polytheistic.
Hmm.
I love working with the idea of multiple deities. And the first thing that drew me to paganism as a sapphic person was the idea that God isn't just a all male or
Hmm.
father archetype or
Right.
big looming scary sky god, that there was the goddess and
Hmm.
Mother Earth and, all of this feminine energy in divine expression. So that was the first thing that really drew me to paganism to begin
Hmm.
with, but also the polytheism.
Hmm.
And I also want to bring up that some pagans don't are non-theistic, as in they don't
Hmm.
really work with deities.
Hmm.
So just like know that whatever works for you is great. And if this is, if working with deities isn't really your thing, there are people out there that feel the same way. I like working with deity energies,
Hmm.
and I have found many to be
Hmm.
very queer expressions.
That's awesome. And I hear what you're saying because I don't generally have particular patron deities that I work with, but that doesn't stop me from, I think I work with them more in the abstract versus rather than working with them one on one for that reason. So I will like, hey, I will say the lady or the Lord or I don't say the Lord because that's too Christian
Catholic.
hetero focus for me. But again, for years, when I would pray, I would ask the lady for protection, and that can fit so many different kind of non-denominational goddesses that are all over around. So you can pray to the father or a father type deity or a mother type deity without getting specific into which one you are,
Yeah.
for the reason that they are all as an archetype connected.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I was going to say is I think about deity as
Hmm.
archetypal expressions of where
Hmm.
spirit meets human expression, because
Hmm.
we have characterized these deities in so many different ways, but really it's also like an expression of our culture, our mythology, our beliefs, our ideas, our imagination, truly.
Hmm.
And so many people hear these stories or put energy into it or beliefs into it, that it also like feeds into that this energy exists in the world. But I think every individual story of a deity that has a name and a personality and an archetype and
Hmm.
expression is really just a tiny, tiny sliver of what God or goddess or the
Right.
universe truly is.
Hmm.
But it is really fun to take that spiritual
Yes.
energy and personify it, give it a name, give it an attitude, and work with it.
And as humans, that's something we do. When we don't know how to explain something, we create a story for it, or we create a an archetype or a deity who explains who's over that kind of thing. So that way, if something goes wrong or something goes right,
Yep.
they have a name to it. We name
Or even
things.
we would do it to explain or tell a story around natural occurrences,
Hmm.
natural disasters. Like we had a thunderstorm roll through hardcore yesterday, and I was just like, there was one moment where the lightning and thunder hit at the same time. It was so loud, it like shook the building. I swear it
Mm.
hit our building. It was so, and I just
Wow.
like my hair stood on end, and like, you know, your nerves get shot like, like, okay. And then I'm just thinking, calm down, Zeus. I am impressed. You got me. But chill, man. Calm down.
Right.
I used to also think of rain as a kid. I would always say it was like, oh, God's tears. They're
Hmm.
grieving.
I love that thing that we do as a species to name things and to identify
Yeah.
why and how things are. Pulling us back to our topic, kind of touched on this earlier. Not all deities are heteronormative. We are definitely living in the age since the Industrial Revolution, since the Renaissance, and even
Victorian
before
era.
that, Victorian era. All through that period of time, things have gotten much more heteronormative because historically, homosexuality was thought of radically different in Greek
Well,
and
in
Roman
the
times. And it
yeah,
didn't,
they didn't bat an eye at it at
yeah,
all. Like,
there wasn't a name for it because it was just part of the culture. You didn't self-identify one thing or another. And that was something that I
yeah.
thought was really cool as we were doing research into the different gods and goddesses that we'll list out in a little bit. And I heard someone said this phrase that I thought was great. Most of the ancient Greek gods didn't really have a concept of sexual orientation. They were just attracted beautiful. They were just
Mm,
attracted to beautiful. So whether that beauty was in masculine form or feminine form or some sort of hybrid of the two, there wasn't a orientation. So you could prefer a lover of some sort, but it didn't really mean one thing or another the way we have very much
yeah.
segregated into hetero and homosexual camps in the last 500 years.
Yeah, it's really a shame that we raised people that way. Because you
Oh
look
God,
like
yes.
this at birth, you are expected to behave and love in this kind of way. Like,
Hmm.
please. You know what? The proof that there are queer deities is because there are queer humans. And
Hmm.
the proof that homosexuality and queerness is completely natural is because it exists in nature,
Hmm.
in
Oh yeah.
humanity. Like, you can't deny its existence. It's proven. It's there. It's
Mhm.
not an alien concept. Let's just put it that way.
And it's not specific to humans. I mean,
No.
like you said, it's in multiple different species have the same kind of tendencies. They don't have the language. Your
that
average
that
bird
they're
doesn't have they
defined.
have their own language, but they don't have a language comprehensible to human to be able to say anything. I think of the gay penguins who
Yeah.
raise fledgling other
Yeah.
penguins. It's really there is no concept of
And
sexual
there's a lot of
orientation.
like species or things that we consider alive that are
Hmm.
intersex or can change sexes. And so it's
Hmm.
like the world out there is vast. Quit trying to box humans in to these
Hmm.
ideas that are antiquated. In antiquity, there's proof of historically having queer folks in other cultures.
Exactly. Just really the surgence of the Judeo-Christian construct and that really kind
Mind
of
control.
that split that into gender binaries because the
Yeah,
the two-spirit people
right.
is indigenous. That's been around for long before colonization. That
Exactly.
concept of it in there. I mean, there were a
And
lot of
colonization almost like came in and tried to make them believe that that was somehow wrong or bad
mhm,
in some cases, and they have to like learn to get back to themselves because
mhm,
our culture has tried to shame or change people. And yeah, it's really heartbreaking. I remember watching a documentary about a concept in India, in the Indian subcontinent,
mhm,
of hijra, who
hmm,
is like a third gender that are neither female nor male. They would often kind of be seen as people that you would go to for spiritual services. There's a lot of queerness that has happened throughout the world
mhm.
and throughout history that we're not always talking about.
Or that was not written down. That was
Yeah.
orally translated, and as the conquered, history is written by the winner. So they're going to always present things that are different through or against the previous culture. The conquered's voice is not always heard. In fact, the conquered's voice is rarely heard, other than through small oral traditions that get passed down. So it's really enlightening as those oral traditions are becoming more widely known through the grace of the internet and everything else, and hearing those stories and the research being done, that it's more coming to light. It's really kind of a cool thing
Yeah.
to me that we are finding out that how much queer there really was and has
Yep.
been in
And
history.
will always be. I remember as a younger
Hmm.
pagan attending a big convention, and I attended a ritual. So in this convention, different groups from different areas would kind of sign up to host a ritual
Hmm.
for like a hour and a half, 2 hour session. I think it was about an hour and a
Hmm.
half, 90 minutes. And I remember attending one called Yes, They Are. And it was all about deities that actually have like this queer flavor to them that, it was some of them was actually kind of surprising because I never really you just accepted the heteronormative explanation that I
Hmm.
got, and I never
Right.
thought too deep about it until somebody did a whole presentation on it. And it was really cool because it was a play. People were honestly, I think, channeling their deities and dressed as this deity, channeling that spirit. And on their time, they would come in and do a little monologue, kind of an explanation about what their feelings are about queer culture and queer pagans and like how they work with them and what about their story is queer. And it really opened my mind up to really consider
Hmm.
that some of these deities want to be working with us in a
Hmm.
queer under the queer umbrella. With that said, what are some of the deities that you think of as queer?
Growing up in the US, first access that I really had to deity work is Greek and Roman mythology. The first thing that comes to mind, Eros, the god of lust, because he
Mm,
had both male and female lovers. He kind of goes out there. I mean, when you're talking about the god of lust, lust is it's all encompassing. Across orientations and everything else. That's the first one I
mm.
think of. And then I think of Artemis.
Which also makes me think of Apollo. I think Apollo and Hermes could have a twink off.
Possibly. Very
I would
possibly.
love to see them both go dancing in a gay bar.
Right?
But Artemis being the sapphic lesbos equivalent of Apollo, where Apollo's the twink boy, pretty boy that has all kinds of lovers. Artemis is like, I'm doing this on my own terms. I got my
Right.
band of ladies. I got
Artemis is
my
the butch queen.
for real. Yeah.
Seriously, when you think about it, because again, the whole idea of her story is telling Zeus, "I don't want a husband. I don't want a man. I don't need a man. I'm going to be the virgin," and I'm putting virgin in big, huge air quotes. I'm going to be the
Because it means
virgin goddess,
unmarried.
who's also the patron goddess of childbirth, by the way, but the virgin goddess,
Yeah.
who surrounds herself with a whole bunch of women.
That's the I don't need no man goddess.
Right. So there's that. However, she does fall in love with Orion, which is one of my favorite stories, and that
Mm.
kind of construct of so she has that kind of pansexual,
See,
bisexual aspect to her, but because she didn't wasn't generally married or considered married to another male deity, for lack of a better phrase, she was considered the virgin goddess, and therefore follows out with the idea of sapphic love, but also
I love that you kind of called her a butch queen, except for me, like she's totally like a femme, like a
yeah,
lipstick lesbian at the same time.
I
Because
see
I
her
always
as
think of
both.
100%, like the
Hmm.
one that could do both. You know what I mean? Like the one that
Oh.
can do it all, can go hunt and then dance and celebrate. And
Hmm.
I think of her as independently sexual. They
Hmm.
desexualize her because she's a virgin, but really that just means she was unmarried. She was free and flowy and had phases like the moon does.
Right. And I think what's great about that is, again, we both see a different image
Yeah.
of her in our minds, but I don't think
Hmm.
either are wrong. The other
No.
thing that I think is really kind of a cool concept is she can be both butch and femme and arrow. And literally in the sense, not
Right.
just she's shooting arrows, but the fact that she doesn't need a lover. She has the aspect of, I am completely disinterested in sex. I completely don't need either gender. So that asexual, aromantic
Hmm.
also is very much an Artemis kind of thing. It's different aspects of that goddess
Yeah.
depending on what lens you're looking at her through.
I've heard even Hera is kind of seen as like a protector of gay marriage
Okay.
because she protects unions of all sorts and loyalty and
Mhm.
and marriage, and she is not opposed to marriage in any way it, manifests between two loving, consenting
Mhm.
human adults.
Dionysus.
Oh, please, yes.
Again, totally Dionysus. He was considered gender fluid. So many pictures of Dionysus is he's a fertility god. He is all
Yep.
over the spectrum. Had multiple lovers, including the satyr Ampelos, who becomes the grapevine, and
Mm-hmm.
Ariadne. There's so many different
He gives bear
lovers.
vibes.
Yes, definitely has daddy bear vibes.
Is okay, is like into like pleasure and
Hmm.
indulgence and being alive
Yes.
and enjoying it.
A couple other ones, Pan, as
Mm,
pansexual.
exactly. Yep. I know some mythologies he can get a little questionable consent wise,
Yeah.
but he definitely is like the satyr
Hmm.
of that animal side of us that really wants that kind of physical, intimate connection
Hmm.
with another being.
There's others, obviously, but those are the
Oh,
biggest of the
yes.
Greek pantheon. Now, again, I don't know much about some of the other different pantheons that are out there, but there are a few that I have heard, even in general, as I've learned stories, or like I said, at PantheaCon over the years,
Hmm.
hearing and learning about the different religions and
Yes.
different deities that are come through.
I don't know a whole lot about the Norse pantheon, except that I
Mhm.
keep getting exposed to it by friends who do. And culturally, it's kind of a hot topic these days because of some comic books somewhere, I
The
guess.
MCU.
But like, so I've kept hearing the story of Loki being kind of a
Hmm.
shapeshifter, including a genderqueer, gender fluid experience where Loki shapeshifts and becomes a mother
Yes, becomes a mare.
who, a
Because
mare.
he's hiding. Loki
Yeah,
Loki is hiding from
do
because
tell.
Loki doing all over Loki
Because
things.
Loki do, as Loki do.
No, he was
I don't
hiding
even
as a
know why
mare.
it's like Beetlejuice. I'm saying his name too many times.
I don't. Yeah, that is a god that I am happy to let be their trickster god on their own and everything else. But the story is, yeah, they were hiding from something, and I can't remember what it is specifically. I'd have to look it up. But basically, during the time he was hiding as a mare, he was impregnated by the stallion. Because
Hmm.
those kinds of
Because
things
of
happen.
course.
So he gave birth. As a mare, he gave birth to Sleipnir.
Near eight-legged horse
Mm-hmm.
who was employed by Odin. Oh, there's a word for this. Psychopomp? Is that the word I'm thinking of? Where they will go between the land of the living and the land of the dead?
I think
Like
so. Yeah.
so much like a messenger, much like Hermes and
Mm-hmm.
Mercury. Sleipnir was like Odin's little psychopomp buddy that could carry even the gods or the
Mm-hmm.
dead from here to there. I am fascinated by the stories that I do get,
Mm-hmm.
and Loki's shapeshifting and gender fluidity and being a
Mm-hmm.
mother. I
Right.
have a deep appreciation for the idea of Loki as a mother. Hey, might be a mother mare, but a mother nonetheless. So very much could be a mischievous spirit to connect with around gender questioning and gender exploration.
Mm-hmm.
There are even like some believed queer expressions of deity, even as far back as Egyptian
Mm-hmm.
pantheons. They say Isis and Nephthys were sisters
Mm-hmm.
and
Again, with the
constant
air quotes around the
companions, right?
sisters.
The big sister, like they were roommates. And then there's the god Atum,
Mm-hmm.
Atum, who was kind of seen as either both male and female or and gender ambiguous.
Mm-hmm.
And he is like a creator god, like going back to like the genesis of
Mm-hmm.
creation. And they talk about self-pleasure and how he sometimes he's called the god who grows and comes. So he's self-felated to give birth to Shu and Tefnut, who are the ancestors of the other Egyptian gods. Out of the self-love, I birth everything,
Mm-hmm.
the universe. And in a way, that's queer too. I think
Oh,
that
absolutely.
all queer folk are on a journey of self-knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
self-gnosis, self-love, and freedom of expression.
And speaking of birthing and the idea of mothering and mothering
Mm-hmm.
relationships that sometimes with queer things are, I can think of at least one or two goddesses. I know one of them's your patron, who are not identified specifically don't have stories about being in queer relationships. However,
Mm-hmm.
they become the mother of
Mm-hmm.
queer
Oh,
family,
mm-hmm.
the mother of the queer.
Bridget, for one, has been to me one of the patron goddesses of the queer community who would go out there and say, if you have been disowned by your, faulty, imperfect human parents just for being who you are, I'm your mother now. She's going to be at the gay pride parades giving out free mom hugs. That's how been my personal experience with Bridget. She's definitely been somebody I could rely on in absence of my own mother, and in the presence of my mother's rejection of me.
Same with Aphrodite.
Like, oh yeah, she protects love of
She
all
protect
flavors.
Yeah, love of all flavors through her babies, Eros. Eros for
Yeah,
one, and Eros was the first one I talked about in the
right.
earlier. But no, again, she is that she doesn't have the direction, but she is the mother. It's like, nope, love is love. This is what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I am the patron goddess of love, and love in all of its forms. Even though I don't have the experience, I am that P flag parent
Yep.
that I will support all of my children in that aspect, and it
Um,
is love to me.
well, so here's another one. Hecate, being the
Mm,
goddess of the crossroads and liminal spaces,
that would make sense.
is very much a mother protectress in a very like I will fuck you up kind of way if you
Hmm.
fuck with my people I'm protecting, especially for those who are going through transitions or
Hmm.
who exist within liminal spaces, whether that be gender or sexuality, and that includes those spaces within us. So you can also call on her for some fierce mother protection,
Hmm.
but she also in turn demands a little bit of shadow work.
So we have mentioned several. There's always more, and we want to know what you guys think. Goddesses and goddesses do you identify as queer, or who have been queer
Mm-hmm.
for
Who do
you?
you work with? We're only scratching the surface, I'm sure, and we're only knowledgeable around cultures and the pantheons that we have actually deep, rabbit holed into.
How do you build relationships with that kind of queer
Mm-hmm.
aspect of deity?
The first thing I do when people say, I don't know what deities to work with, or I don't know who my deities are, how do you know? How do you even know? The first thing I say is, well, ask yourself who you felt drawn to historically. What deities do you know a lot of things about just naturally because of
Hmm.
curiosity? Who comes to mind immediately for you when you think about connecting with deity?
Who do you want to connect with?
Deities really are energies that tend to be a reflection of our humanity,
Hmm.
of our divineness within our humanity. And I feel like they like to work with us to help us empower ourselves to be authentic and
Hmm.
to live the life that brings us fulfillment.
And with that comes that idea of flexibility and consent and openness, in that if you want to work, you can choose the level of how deep you want to work.
You can have casual
You
relationships
can
with some
have, exactly,
deities.
you can have casual relationships with deities. They choose to do that. And they may say, hey, you know what? I'm not a casual kind of girl. If you want to work with me, this will be required.
Definitely consent into it. A lot of people are afraid, have expressed like this whole, oh, I'm afraid like they're going to ask more of me than I'm willing to give, or I'm afraid to work with this one because they scare me. Consent goes both ways, even
Hmm.
within spiritual workings with
Hmm.
spiritual entities. So you can say no. When
Hmm.
we were talking about our beloved Loki,
Yes.
we can be like, I love you, but I don't want to work with your chaotic energy right now because
Yes.
I
I have too much chaos in my life currently to work with a chaos deity. Thank you, but no.
So yes, consent goes both ways, and also deities can tell you no. That
Hmm.
you can knock on their door and they could say, "You're not ready." I have seen
Hmm.
people turned away and say, "Come back later," or "Learn some
Hmm.
more," or "I want you to do this with your life before we sit down and work on this." Or
Physical things that you can do. You
yes,
can build an altar. You can
right,
draw a
right.
picture. You can do a
Uh,
ritual.
obtain some art, paint a
Hmm.
statue, some kind of representation of their symbols,
Hmm.
their, like if I was going to build an altar to Dionysus, I'd
Hmm.
put some wine or at least some grapes
Hmm.
together for him. Think about things that you connect you to their
Hmm.
symbolisms.
Meditations.
There are different ways to connect.
Yes, absolutely. And again, different ways, different levels. You don't have to embrace all aspects of a deity. You can
Mm.
absolutely choose and set the boundaries about how far you are willing to go.
So just to know that there are deities out there that reflect you as a
Hmm.
person, and you and your queerness that can affirm you and your personalities. And you will be able to find the right fit for you. And somewhere deep
Hmm.
in your intuition, you already know who
Hmm.
that is. There is a beautiful rainbow world of deities out there for
Hmm.
all of us to explore. And I
Yes.
do hope that some of our listeners share with us what their queer deity connections are like.
Hmm.
Thank you for listening to the Queer Witch Project, and make sure that you give us a like or a share, 5-star reviews, 10 stars if I give you that many to give to us. And tell us what you think about queer deities.
If there is a topic you want to know more about or an episode topic you want to suggest, please contact us at thequeerwitchproject@gmail.com or find us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram with the handle @queerwitchproject. We upload every other week. And remember, queerness is a key to magic.
Be yourself and love rebelliously. Bye.
Bye.
My grandma really liked her soap operas, and Greek mythology was like one of the best soap operas I experienced
Oh,
as a
God,
child.
yes. Goddess, yes.